It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of the Around the 412 Steelers show. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. And whether you're listening on a listening platform like Spotify or Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, go check out the description. We've got links to everything custom designs. It's our friend Haley Wagner's small business. She does customized clothing for you guys. We have a Facebook and an Etsy link, so if you want to go check that out, it's linked on every single show we do. And like I said, this is the Steelers show. Alexa, you can start playing In the Arms of the Angel. How I was happy opening up last week. Yeah, there it is. How I was happy opening up last week's show because we got an extra week of football. That extra week was abruptly ended by the Buffalo Bills. It was extended by a day, though, because of inclement weather. So we got a little bit more time with this Steelers season. But, the Steelers fall to the Buffalo Bills 31-17. Steelers' season is officially over.
Yeah, I'll be honest. In that game, obviously didn't start out in the best way. They fall down 21-0. Knew it was going to be hard to climb out. They had a tall mountain to climb to begin with. As soon as this game kicked off, I can't even remember going back to last week. The predictions. Did you predict them to upset Buffalo?
24-23 with a walk-off kick field goal. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Now I remember that because I was thinking, like, man, how dramatic would that be? I thought it would be more competitive the entire way than it was, but I do appreciate the way that those Steelers fought back. I think like that kind of goes to show the resiliency that they showed as a group despite everything that happened with them this year. And that's not me making an excuse for the injuries they suffered, because it seemed like, man, league wide there was just injuries. In this game, we saw Buffalo lose more starters on their deep. Like they were undermanned themselves, and they lost even more guys in this game. But just a testament to me to the way that the Steelers kind of always rally around and they never give up. So I appreciate that aspect, even at one point making it a one possession game after Calvin's Austin's touchdown to make it a 21, or was it 21-14 at the time, or no, 24-17 at the time it made it. But yeah, they do fall. Their season is over, and with that, comes a lot of questions about potential changes going into the next season. And basically immediately we got into that because Tomlin was asked about it, with just tried to be asked about it with just 1 year left on his contract. Before the question could leave Brooke Pryor's lips, Mike Tomlin was off the podium and out the door, walking off. And Alan and I had a conversation about this, and we have two different perspectives, and that's why I wanted specifically to ask him on there what his thought was, because he is on the media side, I'm on the fan side. This was just my opinion of it. I thought that would be a type of question better suited for, like, Tomlin is speaking tomorrow, his end of season press conference. To me, that is the time and place for it, not necessarily right after you just lose a playoff game. So I could understand the frustration. Now, still unexpected in my opinion for Tomlin to do that. I would have thought he would give a non-answer or just say it's not on his mind right now, something along those lines, as opposed to just walking off. Personally, I love the move, but if I was the one asking the question in that room, I could see how it would be taken as like a slap in the face.
So what did Alan say from a media perspective?
Oh, yeah. I mean, kind of he didn't think it was like a slap in the face, I guess, necessarily, but he was like, she has every right to ask that question in that set. Like, somebody was going to ask that question.
She has every right, but he has every right to do what he did too. That's the way I'd look at it. I can get why it would be annoying for Tomlin to have to deal with that right after a loss. I'm sure Tomlin has, even whether it's from a media, people asking him about it or just behind closed doors, he's heard about how this is going to be his last year of his contract a lot. I'm sure he's probably not blind to all the talks about whether people want him back or whether he cares or not. That's another thing. But whether he sees it, I think that's a whole different thing. I think he definitely notices when people talk about his job. So, I mean, yeah, I thought the move was funny more than anything. Just seeing him walk away mid-sentence was pretty comical in my eyes. But yeah, at the end of the day, he answered the question ultimately, or at least it sounds like he's going to be coming back. And I feel like Steeler fans are probably going to be pretty split on how they feel about that, despite getting to the postseason and having a strong finish to your season. I feel like the Steeler fans and the Steeler fan base is going to be pretty split on whether they want Tomlin back or not. And honestly, I'm pretty split on it just internally with myself, because to me, it's like how you could always do worse. Like there's no guarantee that your next coach is going to be better than what Tomlin could bring you. But it almost feels like the Steelers are at a point now where it just feels like they're perennially going to be like a 9-8, 10-7 football team that gets bounced in the first round unless something changes. And if Tomlin's not going to change, there needs to be major shakeup to roster personnel and coaching staff below him. So it just feels like the Steelers are at a point where they need to make some sort of change. I don't think they're that far off of being a really good team. And I think that at times you could see that in a game like they had against the Bills. And when you look at, obviously everybody's suffering injuries, but when you look at some of the injuries they had defensively all year, and then look at the struggles they had offensively and the whole drama with the coordinator and the quarterbacks, if you're able to solve some of that, I feel like the Steelers are at a pretty good place. But until they're able to solve that, and who knows if Tomlin's going to be the guy to be able to solve that, it just feels like something's got to give at one point, because it feels like, to me, for the last several years, they are going to be a average in the terms of like 9-8 is pretty much as close to average as you can get, like just 1 win above 500 as you can get with a 17-game season, and then one bounce on the playoffs. Like I just don't feel like the Steelers, unless there's a big shakeup at some point, whether that's head coach, quarterback, coordinator, whoever it's going to be, is going to be a real contender until something happens.
Yeah, I understand that perspective, and I think that a lot of fans do feel that way, feeling like they're basically stuck. How many times are we going to see the exact same story play out the way that it did this year? And it's interesting because it's like everybody always, okay, so he's now 8-10 playoff record. But it's just funny because you would almost, because you're so sick of hearing about it, or at least I am, you would almost rather have them miss the playoffs, because it doesn't give him the opportunity to add a playoff loss to a superior team like the Buffalo Bills. Now, sure, there are some bad playoff losses in there, but like, to me, this isn't one that you can attribute, put it on coaching. Like, to me, the entire reason they lost this game was they shot themselves in the foot early with the George Pickens fumble, Mason Rudolph interception in the end zone. To me, those aren't coaching things. And I understand the defensive deficiencies in the last 5 playoff games for sure. Like, the biggest thing to me that's curious is the takeaways. Just 2 takeaways in their last 5 playoff games. Both of them came in that loss to Kansas City, but they've given the ball away 10 times, which is a complete inverse of what they do in the regular season. So why has that been so different in the playoffs is what I want to know. It's not that you can answer that question or anything. I'm just, I'm throwing it out there because it makes no sense to me that they have a 10-2 turnover differential against them when that is the complete opposite of what they've been in the regular season as a football team. I'm on board with Tomlin coming back. And this is a for the time being thing because of the other stuff that you kind of mentioned there. I'm okay with Tomlin coming back. I'm on board with it, depending on everything else that takes place. Like, you gotta commit, in my opinion, to the offensive side of the football for sure. And what I mean by that is the staff, the offensive coordinator. But not only that, I think you gotta turn the page at quarterbacks coach. I think you gotta turn the page at wide receivers coach. I think you gotta turn the page at offensive line coach. I'm okay with Eddie Faulkner obviously remaining the running backs coach. I think he's maybe the best position coach that they have. And then Alfredo Roberts, who's the tight ends coach. I think he's fine. I feel like he's brought Freiermuth along okay. Darnell Washington was fine as a rookie for what he was giving you. And Connor Heyward, who was a late round pick, I feel like is an asset to the team as well. So I think that he's fine to keep around too. But yeah, Tomlin staying, in my opinion, is fine. But there needs to be a lot of change around him returning.
Yeah, I'm looking at their past records and just kind of like, if what I'm thinking or how I feel is actually the case, and it pretty much is. Since 2018, they've finished right around like hovering around the 500, or it's just like what I would consider like a above average team or like above mediocre team. Like 2018, they go 9-6-1, miss playoffs. 2019, 8-8, they missed playoffs. 2020 is the outlier here, but that was the weird year where they started 11-0, but then they lost 5 out of their last 6 games, and they went and lost in the wild cards to the Browns. I mean, that terrible finish to that year, but it's just that seems like the outlier of the recent stretch, because in 2021 they were 9-7-1, lost in the wild card to that game in Kansas City. Last year didn't make playoffs, 9-8. This year they were 10-7, obviously lost to the Bills. But it just feels like we've been kind of repeating the same season over and over again since that last like actual playoff run, if you want to call it, they had in 2017, whenever we still had the Killer Bees and we lost to Jacksonville.
Still only played one playoff game though.
Still only played in one playoff game because of the bye. Yeah. But then, like the year before that, they at least like they made the AFC Championship and everything. Like it feels like ever since that couple year run where they went to the AFC Championship, lost to the Patriots, and then played Jacksonville, lost, but they won their division. They were 13-3. It just feels like there hasn't been that much improvement of the team. Like obviously, like different positions have gotten better, but I mean, just overall as a team, it's kind of been the same story and the same narrative every single year as far as like what kind of record they ended up having and what kind of playoff success they ended up having if they got to the playoffs. Like, I just feel like the Steelers are almost in limbo, not saying that that's because of Tomlin, but just because of a lot of decisions that have been made by the organization, not just him.
I think to be honest, the biggest culprit of where the Steelers are at, other than like, because I don't think that the roster's necessarily been very good. Like to be fringe wild card team or whatever, sure. But I think that it's a product of Tomlin to even be able to get this team, the roster that as constructed, to the playoffs. Like, I think no business winning 10 games this year when you look at what they finished with. No business winning 9 games last year. Sure as hell shouldn't have won 8 games in 2019 when you lost, Ben. So, like, I'll hear the arguments for sure about can they still get to the big one, win the big one with him as the head coach, especially with the staff that's been around him in this time being. But I think without question, what nobody can debate is that he elevates the floor of a football team. Definitely. If you want to say that the ceiling might be lower, okay, like I can't dispute that. But what I can dispute is the floor part, because I think top to bottom, when you look at some of these rosters, no business being over 500. And while I understand that that's not the goal, 17 straight seasons of being at least 500, while he won't talk about it, he hates when people bring it up, and it's not the goal just to be 500, is super impressive for that reason. There's no reason that some of these rosters should have been 500.
Yeah, I mean, the one that really sticks out is still that 2019 season to me, when they lost Ben in the second game of the season, and you have Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, and you still ended up finishing at 8-8. I thought that was full credit to Tomlin and the way he was able to raise that team up from what they had that season. But it's still like, I'm not, and this is not me saying that I think it's fine that Tomlin is coming back. I just want to get that out, because everything that I say is probably going to sound contradictory to that. But like, when you don't win a playoff game since 2016, and you've played in several since that time, and going back to winning multiple playoff games, you have to go back to when they lost the Super Bowl against Green Bay. I mean, it is kind of frustrating from like watching this organization just not have postseason success. And obviously, I know not every team's going to have postseason success, and several teams have way longer postseason droughts than we've had as far as winning a game. I mean, the Detroit Lions just won their first game in 32 years in the postseason. So how am I going to complain about like 8 years? But regardless of that, I just feel like something has to be a major change for the Steelers. And if it's not going to be Mike Tomlin, it has to be his coaching staff, and it has to be personnel. If it's me, I am fully exploring a third option at quarterback next year that goes along with Mason Rudolph, if you think he's going to be back, and Kenny Pickett. I even said a couple weeks ago that I thought that the biggest problem of the offense up to this point was the quarterback. And I thought that was proven after seeing what Mason was able to do in the same exact offense that Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett weren't able to do. So if quarterback's going to change, and obviously there's coaching staff decisions that have to change, but there has to be a huge fundamental identity change offensively. And then defensively, I mean, you're just still going to have to continue to get better. And honestly, this season, the defense wouldn't have been that bad except for you lost key players over the middle. You had several weeks this season without Minkah Fitzpatrick. You didn't have TJ Watt in this playoff game. I mean, there was several areas. Cam Heyward was hurt for a while.
I would say really the entire season they didn't actually have. They might have been on the field at times, but they really didn't have Cam Heyward or Minkah Fitzpatrick this year.
Yeah,
as themselves.
Yeah, I mean, and every team struggles with that, but you can understand why the defense was the way it was when you look at what they've lost, and it's not just like recently. It's for the majority of the season that they struggled the way they did.
And here's the thing, and it's going to sound like I'm making excuses, and I get it. I just think it's important to add context every step of the way. So when you look at every playoff game that's taken place since they last won one, which was, like you mentioned, so we could start with the 2016 AFC Championship game where they didn't have either running back available because of injuries. Le'Veon Bell hurt his groin. He went in with an injury and then re-aggravated that groin injury in the game.
Man, they were playing New England in Foxborough. They were never going to win that game anyway.
Right. I just wanted to go down the list. 2017, that was the year. Unfortunately, Ryan Shazier got hurt, and we pulled Sean Spence off the couch, played 80% of the snaps after not being in football. And they give up 45 points at home to Blake Bortles, despite scoring. Now, despite scoring 42, still to me, they let Jacksonville get out to a 21-0 lead. One of those was a pick six by Ben. And that's another part of it. Like, nobody talks about how poorly Ben has played in the latter portion of his career in the playoffs, because if you look at his numbers, he's a big part of the reason that they haven't won a playoff game in a long time, in my opinion. 2018, they completely missed the playoffs. So why did that happen? The offense was still pretty good. I think that they didn't have the secondary, and at that point, they hadn't even tried to replace Ryan Shazier, because it wasn't until the following year where they traded up for Devin Bush in 2019. The year Ben gets hurt, so obviously they didn't make the playoffs that year either. Not really much to say with there. 2020, they make the playoffs. Obviously, that's the collapse year. Kind of a mirage. I think everybody feels that way. Nobody expected them to be 11-0. They didn't look like an 11-0 football team while they were. But I thought they were still an okay football team. I definitely think that they were a playoff caliber football team that year. And once again, Cleveland jumps out to like a 3-possession lead before we blink in the playoffs. Like, that to me has been the story of the playoffs for the Steelers every season since they last won one. Is the offense turns the football over, the defense doesn't take it away, and for whatever reason, they give up a bunch of points. Doesn't matter who's on the field. 2021, the loss to the Chiefs. I mean, come on. Did anybody expect that football team had a shot going to Kansas City? There's not even much to say. It didn't matter if everything went right for them in that game. As a matter of fact, everything went right for about a quarter. We jumped out to a 7-0 lead off a Kansas City turnover that TJ Watt took back to the house. TJ Watt tips one in the air that Devin Bush intercepts. They had 6 straight 3-and-outs or something to start that game. Like, Pittsburgh was doing everything that you could have asked for defensively. That offense just was giving them nothing early in that game, and then eventually the defense kind of was worn down, and that was when the Chiefs still had Tyreek Hill to take the top off against us as well. And then this past game, where it was a team that was on their third quarterback for us, no TJ Watt, and again, Minkah Fitzpatrick and Cam Heyward were on the field, but that was not the two players that we've come to know actually out there. So I just wanted to go game by game and look at what has really happened with these teams. Sure, you could make the case that they should have won at least one playoff game somewhere in there. The Cleveland one's probably the biggest letdown just because of the ammunition that it gave them since then. But yeah, here we are. I can understand the desire for change for sure. I think something has to take place. I'm not sure that it had to be the head coach. I told you on here weeks ago, it was probably after the Patriots. No, it was after the Colts loss, that I would be okay if they made a change, potentially even on board with, depending on what it would mean for the rest of the coaching staff. If they go outside the organization, if they make a conscious effort to really improve this offensive coaching staff, then I'm fully on board with Tomlin being back. But if it's again, going to be the same type of deal that we've seen with this offense for years, then I'll go back on my word there, because I would have rather have seen a more drastic shakeup, even if it meant bottoming out for a couple years, because Tomlin isn't here to elevate a bad roster to 8 wins, 9 wins.
Well, Eddie Faulkner did pretty good. We maybe elevate him to OC. How about that?
I do appreciate.
That's what I fully expect, as like if they kept with
no
like
way.
Steelers perspective. Like,
yeah,
that's
because
here's
the thing.
I think they process things. They just can't help themselves.
I can't see it. Like, I really believe that it's finally going to happen where they make a conscious effort to that side of the football, just because I just don't think that the blinders are on now. Like, I think before the Steelers could trick themselves because of the results, I think that the vision is more clear now than ever on the offensive side of the football. Things need to change. Like, I don't think that you fire Matt Canada in season if you're okay with the way things are going offensively. That to me immediately signaled, no matter what they do the rest of the year, they're going outside the organization. They're doing something different once the season's over. All credit to Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan, because I actually thought that they've put together some pretty decent game plans down the stretch here. And they were out of their comfort zone. And I appreciate that. But yeah, I think Eddie Faulkner can stay on. I would actually promote Eddie Faulkner. Alan brought this up. I thought it was a good point. I think he's deserving of a promotion. You can make him like the running backs coach / assistant head coach, or make him an associate coach or something like that, or run game coordinator. Give him a different title, give him a pay raise, stay on the staff. Great. Mike Sullivan, I would be replacing as well. I mean, you fired Matt Canada largely because of the lack of development of Kenny Pickett. Who's his position coach? Why is he still here? So I think Mike Sullivan has to go too. In any way, when you hire a new offensive coordinator, you got to think for the most part they're going to want to bring in their own offensive staff. So who knows if any of these offensive coaches will be back.
Yeah, that's true. I wanted to bring up another thing that I was thinking about while I was watching the game, and then I was thinking about it after. And it's that football is an unfair game now. It is not a fair game in the sense of how the game is officiated and how that makes the players react to playing. It is unfair in the sense that it is harder now than it ever has been to play defense, and it's way easier to be an offensive player in today's NFL than it is a defensive player. It is so much easier to play the game as an offensive player, because the way that this, not just this referee staff, but just the NFL referees in general, the way that they officiate the game now, the way the rules are written, it is so much harder to play as a defensive player because you don't know how to tackle or where to tackle them or when you should tackle them, anything like that. And the perfect examples I look at are, while I don't know that Josh Allen was quote unquote faking his slide. Like he didn't do what Kenny Pickett did, where he went to a knee and then came back up. Like, but the stuttering, it was like the players kind of froze for a second, and it's hard to really blame them in that sense, because if you touch the quarterback, it's automatically 15 yards if he actually goes down. And so when he does that and then he scores that 52-yard touchdown, I mean, people get pissed at the players, but it's almost like they have to be hesitant because it's harder to play defense because they don't know if they're going to get flagged for that. And then when you see what happens later in the game where Miles Jack, and if we're just being completely honest, as far as late hit goes, that wasn't bad. But like, what is Miles Jack supposed to do in that sense where he's just like, earlier in this game, we saw this guy stutter and take it to the house. How am I supposed to do that? Football is unfair now if you are a defensive player, because you don't look at that. And then everybody looks at the way that the knee injury, what game was it? The knee injury.
The Rams,
happened.
Tyler Higbee.
Yeah. It's like, I understand that people are upset about that hit, but that's the way you're telling DBs to tackle people, especially big guys like Tyler Higbee, big tight ends. You are telling them to go at their legs. And whether you want to call it dirty or not, I'm not going to necessarily say whether it's dirty or not. But I am saying that is how the NFL has written that they want people to tackle people. They want them to go for their legs. They don't want them to go at their head. And it's unfair for defensive players to have to play in the construct of the game as it currently is. I just think it makes it so much harder for them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a product of the league understanding what sells. They want these games to have as most point, like it's catered to offense. It's all about points and what excites the fans. But it's funny because in turn, we end up having conversations like this. I think every fan complains about officiating crews, and then you start conversations about people saying things are fixed, they're rigged, or whatever. No, like the officials are just bad. Like that's what it is. And that it's catered to offense. So yeah, I completely agree with that. That it's never been harder to play defense in the NFL. I feel like we got to touch on this at least briefly. I don't know that we're going to have like an in-depth conversation on it, but Mason Rudolph, all credit to him, started the last 4 games of the Steelers season, 3 to get them into the playoffs and then the playoff game. And in this game started out very poorly. Thought he, played better as the game went on, kept it competitive. I thought he battled the whole time. Testament to him. But today, Diontae Johnson was kind of talking about it. Mason Rudolph is a free agent and said, he wasn't surprised by what Mason did. It's kind of, he feels like it's always been in there. Think about it. Mason played 2019 was the year Ben got hurt. Mason played a lot of football in 2019. Him and Duck kind of split in time, which was Diontae Johnson's rookie year. So you could argue that was really like his first quarterback that he developed a relationship with. But he kind of went to bat for Mason, and I don't know if people are taking his quote the wrong way or if what he truly meant by it, but basically said that he would like to see him get the job next year. Now, when he said that, is he meaning like does he just want him back on the Steelers roster, or is he talking about he wants him to be the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers? I don't know how to take that. I don't know how Kenny Pickett is going to feel about that. To be honest with you, I don't necessarily care how Kenny Pickett feels about it.
Who cares how Kenny Pickett feels about it? If we're being completely honest.
But this is just a couple days after the season ends, and you've got Diontae Johnson potentially advocating for the guy who started this season as QB3 returning to be the starting quarterback for the team. What are your thoughts on this?
If you would have told me in really any stretch between 2020 to before this season, or even at the start of this season, mid-season, in October of the 2023 season, November of the 2023 season,
basically
before Mason Rudolph stepped into a game this season, anywhere between that then and that 2019 season, if you would have said that we'd be talking about in 2024 Mason coming back as the starter for this team, I would not have believed you. I would have thought you're nuts. And here we are. I can't believe that I was actually thinking about that in my head. I was like, when was Mason drafted? This was his 6th season with the Steelers, which is absolutely crazy because it doesn't feel like
it's like the third longest tenured, I believe. You got Cam, you got TJ, and then you got him and Chooks. 2018 class.
It's wild to believe that he stuck around that long. And you know what? As far as the quote goes, I have no idea what Diontae Johnson means. But if he does intend to mean that he wants him back to compete for that starting spot or like get the starting spot, I can't really blame him because they were winning football games. And they were winning football games consistently. Obviously, they've lost this playoff game to the Bills, but they went 3-0 going into the postseason with Mason Rudolph under center. The offense, while maybe it didn't look hugely different statistically, but they also scored 30-plus games in 2 of the games. They had more of a rhythm, I felt like, for the majority of that. And whether that's Mason Rudolph being the factor for that or them actually finding out an identity and just learning they need to run the football, probably goes hand in hand there. But I can't blame a player, especially a player that benefits from Mason Rudolph being in there, saying that he wants to see him back because they won football games. The offense looked and felt a lot different than it did in the weeks prior, especially when Mitch Trubisky was in there and at most of the time whenever Kenny Pickett was in there. So I cannot blame a player for wanting him back. Whether the Steelers are going to do that or not, I think that's an interesting conversation to have because you would assume that Mitch Trubisky's gone. There's no way that he's a Steeler next year. Absolutely no way. And are you really going to run into unless the only way I see Mason Rudolph not come back is if they do bring in somebody like a Kirk Cousins or someone where it's like, okay, we're bringing this guy in. He is our starter. Kenny, you're the backup. And then they bring in another guy to be their third string quarterback, like whether it's a mid or late round draft guy or whoever it's going to be. That's the only way that I don't see Mason back. Otherwise, if you're rolling into next year with Kenny Pickett as your penciled down starter, and then you're going to bring in another draft guy or something, I feel like Mason Rudolph has to be on the roster because you saw that he's able to operate the offense and could be an insurance policy just in case something happens to Kenny Pickett, or even if he wins the starting job, he could be the starter. But it all depends on what their quarterback plan is outside of Mason Rudolph. I think that it really boils down to how they're viewing their starting quarterback position next year, where you're going to have to either get one of these older guys that are proven starters and they would come in and be your starter right away. But if they're not going to do that, I think Mason has to come back.
Okay, so we're not on the same side here, and I feel like it's rare because you're talking about the quarterback room, and I get that. I'm looking at it being, assumingly, a very different offense, a different offensive coordinator. So, and Kenny Pickett being back, I feel like it's just like it's going to happen because of his contract status.
Well,
so,
yeah.
I think you build the room with Kenny Pickett, a vet, in a mid-round draft pick. If that offense is going to look very different, that offensive coordinator is going to want that veteran quarterback to be somebody that's either very familiar with the system or somebody that can run that offense. Could it be Mason Rudolph? Potentially. It's going to be somebody, in my opinion, that has some type of connection to that specific offensive coordinator, or at least something similar to that system. I don't see it. And I think the stuff with Mason Rudolph, again, while I appreciate it, the small sample size, they're very familiar with this guy. He's been around since 2018, and he started out as the number 3 quarterback on their depth chart this year. I don't think that they necessarily view him very highly. I think that's why he started out as the number 3 quarterback. It took Mitch Trubisky playing as poorly as he did for Mason to get into the lineup. I don't think that they're going to let a 3, because I don't really think that again, I appreciate the battle in the playoff game for sure, but I don't think he was good in that game. I don't think they're going to let such a small sample size of decent quarterback play end up giving a guy like a 2-year, $15 million contract or something like that, which is probably what he could get, somewhere in the $7 to $10 million range as a backup quarterback. Just it's hard for me to believe unless it's like the perfect fit for whoever the offensive coordinator being brought in is.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at it as like lack of quarterbacks that you.
I understand. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I probably should have, before asking you that, brought up the thing about the offensive coordinator, because that might not even have been on your mind. Because I get that he ran their offense for 2023 better than any quarterback, but the offense for 2024 could be a completely different offense that he's also never been in.
So we need a better backup to run that offense whenever Kenny sucks.
Who knows what it's also intriguing to me, just because this offensive coordinator that they bring in, they're not going to have any tie. Are they going to want to tie their career? Because that's like a stepping stone position, offensive coordinator. You hope to parlay that into becoming a head coach. Are they going to want to bank on the development of Kenny Pickett and being able to make him look serviceable as an NFL quarterback to be their stepping stone as a head coach? No. I don't know.
I wouldn't. I would not. What has Kenny Pickett shown in 2 years of being an NFL starter that would give you promise if you're an offensive coordinator?
Yeah, like a decent game against the Bengals, and
2 back-to-back game-winning drives against the Raiders and the Ravens his rookie season.
Yeah, some moments in the fourth quarter and 1 1/4 games post Matt Canada.
I mean, I'm out on Kenny. I really am. Until further notice, and basically meaning like until he actually shows that he can be a competent quarterback in the NFL, I'm out on him as a Steelers future. I'm out on him as a Steelers starter, and I'm willing to give any other quarterback a shot, because any of the past games of Kenny Pickett has proven to me that like he doesn't have it. He does not have what it takes to be the Steelers franchise quarterback.
I feel like some more Kenny conversation could come up when we get to our questions, but the last thing I want to bring up before we get to our questions is Cam Heyward. $22.4 million next year if he is back. And I say is. Last year of his deal, obviously getting up there in age, dealt with a ton of injuries this year, was a shell of himself, did not have a single sack this year, just 7 tackles for loss. Very disappointing for him. Obviously didn't contribute the way that he would anticipate or fans would expect. What happens with Cam Heyward? Was this the end of the road, do you think? Does he try to get healthy and come back next year? Is it on I can't, he's not gonna be back at $22.4 million. They would either give him like a 1 year an extension or something like that. They're gonna move money around for sure. But was this the end of the line for Cam Heyward, or is he gonna be back in 2024?
That's tough because to me, and obviously I don't know Cam Heyward at all, but to me, I feel like the only thing that would bring him out of playing would be if it's too hard for him or just too much of an effort to come back from injury this time. Like if it's because he wasn't healthy, like he was playing, but he wasn't healthy. And if it takes too much, or if it's too much for him to be able to come back from this injury and play at his highest level again, if he can even reach that highest level again, then I understand Kenny Heyward not coming back. But otherwise, I know it's these franchise guys. It's hard to imagine them ever being gone. I mean, we went through the same thing with Ben. Obviously, the writing was on the wall for the end, and it seems like that could be the case upcoming with Cam Heyward. It's obviously they won't come back at that number, but I have a hard time envisioning that he's not going to be on the Steelers next year. I have a tough time thinking about that unless the injuries are just too much for him.
Yeah, Alan brought up, I mean, this was a conversation that we had on Afternoon Drive today because we were going through, if anybody wants to check that out, what we did today was went through their free agents and said whether or not they'd be back, along with Cam Heyward and Larry Ogan, like some potential cut candidates as well, and said if they would be back. Also did some coaching staff guys. So, but what I told Alan today was I'm real big on vibes, and I just feel like that was it. I don't know why. I just feel like that was it. That was the end of the road for Cam Heyward. And Alan did not agree with that. He thinks that he is back, but he said there certainly was like a difference this year, not just like the typical end of season stuff from Cam where he's like, I just got to take it day by day and see where I'm at. This year, it's like, man, I don't know if my body's going to cooperate with me wanting to come back. And Cam has said in the past that he's not going to just keep playing because of like his name. Like if he feels like he can't perform anymore, he's not just going to keep playing. And he wasn't able to practice much this year. If that's going to be the case next year, if he's not going to be able to be like a full participant in training camp and have to take multiple days off because of his age and injury, he doesn't think that he's going to want to do it. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I love Cam. If he's able to be healthy and come back, great. But as we sit here right now, I do think that we've seen the last snap as Cam Heyward as a Steeler.
It's crazy. That whole 2010s era is going to be coming to an end. Really,
TJ Watt will be the longest tenured Steeler.
Yeah,
man. And we started this podcast a couple months after TJ was drafted, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So crazy to think about. But we will see what the future holds for Cam Heyward as time goes on. Let's get into some questions. We asked our followers for some questions for tonight's show. This one could be real quick. Alexa said, do you think they would draft me? Absolutely not. That would be a terrible move. Kevin Colbert might have. Omar Khan would not. Much better GM situation now than the Steelers had the last few years of Kevin Colbert's tenure. So, Sarge, who do you think would be the best overall hang? And I literally, I thought that I had to read this again because I thought like I was misreading something from the Steelers. From a nerd aspect, I think it's Cam, but overall vibes, I might say the Herbigs. Love the Herbigs shout, by the way. Great follows on Instagram if you are a food person, because I feel like they are literally always cooking. They're always together. They have a ton of fun together. They're brothers, but they're also very clearly best friends. I think I would fit right in with them. So I love that for sure. I know I'm very biased here, But I'm gonna say E-Rob, my guy Landon Roberts. Seems like a super cool dude. Everything that I hear from Allen, that inside linebacker room just has a ton of fun together. He is an absolute hammer on the field, and apparently, like off the field, he's basically the same. So I would say Landon Roberts. Would love to spend some time with him. What do you think?
I don't know why. My gut reaction just says Najee. Like, and maybe
I don't know if Najee would want that because he's a very reserved person.
Well,
so.
I would say maybe that's my personality. I feel like Najee and I would mesh well together because it's not like I'm not a very outgoing, I guess, person in terms of being like an extrovert and stuff. I feel like Najee's very similar to that, but I don't know. I feel like Najee and I could vibe well together. Another one that is more, I feel like just because of vibes, is Connor Heyward, Cam's little brother. I feel like he would bring good vibes.
Commercial.
Maybe.
You know who? Have you seen that commercial? Okay. It might just be because it's like a local thing, but
yeah.
Tim Oxenrider, friend of the show, is the one that did that commercial.
Oh, really?
The Heywards. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. And also, I mean, the one that is just because, or there's a few just because of friends of the show, but you know, like Minkah Fitzpatrick, Alice Highsmith. That would just be be around the 412 hangout.
Yeah. You know, so
do we have any other currents on the roster that have been on our show?
No, I don't believe
those might be the only two current guys.
Mm-hmm. I mean, JPJ would be cool. Obviously,
gotta change that.
Yeah,
JPJ or JPJ's dad.
Both. I've been in the presence of Joey Porter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Actually, just this past year at a tailgate that he was at, and I was also at.
Nice.
But yeah, that's my answer for that. Sarge has this same question for the Penguins as well, so be prepared for that. But yeah, there's our answer. Sarge, let us know what your he said might do the Herbage.
Can I pick an NFL player, by the way? Just not Steelers, just NFL. And this is definitely has some bias to it.
Kyler Murray, so he play Call of Duty?
No. But this definitely has some bias to it, if you know me. But Jamal Williams.
Yeah, he's awesome. I knew that you were going to say, I thought you were going to say Puka, but I shouldn't have. You were going to say Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is awesome.
Because
I would say if we're going NFL wide, Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson, that's a good one too.
Yeah. Okay.
Over Jamar Chase.
Eddie, and I know why Eddie said this. What are your thoughts on the Steelers taking a flyer on Joe Milton? So he asked me about how I would feel if they like drafted Joe Milton in like the 3rd round or something like that. Joe Milton is one of 2 quarterbacks that I've actually watched so far, because in my mind I've had that the Steelers are going to draft a quarterback in like the middle rounds. So I've watched Michael Pratt at a Tulane, like 3 games that I could find, and I've watched 4 games of Joe Milton up to this point. I want nothing to do with Joe Milton. He's got the size, he's got the arm, he's got like athletically, if you were building a quarterback, he's basically Anthony Richardson. If
Anthony Richardson without the talent.
Yeah.
I was whenever I saw Eddie tweet that, and I was thinking about what I would say about Joe Milton. He's Anthony. That's literally what I said. Is that he is Anthony Richardson without the talent, like without the upside. He's if you just took Anthony Richardson's build, like everything about him, and just made a mediocre player instead of like a NFL player.
Yeah, and instead of an alien. Yeah, and I feel vindicated by this because Eddie reached out to Ramon, Tennessee guy, and he basically said, yeah, like he likes he has the toolbox for sure, but he doesn't know how to use them, so he wants nothing to do with him either. So that's where we're at.
I mean, when we're taking Tennessee quarterbacks, I'm calling in Josh Dobbs to be another backup again before I want Joe Milton on the team. I'm just being completely honest.
Like, there's certainly a point in the draft where it could get to where I'd be like, all right, whatever. But like in the 3rd round, you're still looking for guys that contribute. Honestly, like they could take him in the 5th, and I'd be like, okay, whatever. But like, definitely not before that.
There might even be guys in the 5th I'd rather have.
I'm sure there would be, and I would be like, why are we doing that? Why are we doing this? But I wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be like if they took him in the first 3 rounds. The Do the Steelers make an actual attempt to keep Mason around, or do you give him a relatively low ball number just to say we tried? Or do they forego that and not even try? Who is your ideal pick at 20 as of right now? This comes from Tyler Hurnley. So we've kind of touched on the Mason stuff.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it.
I do think that they'll offer him something to come back. I think that he's going to have a better offer than what that is somewhere else. Because I think that they're going to go into next season. Spoiler alert, this isn't necessarily what I want them to do. I think Kenny Pickett's the starter opening week in 2024. I think it's him. It's a veteran that makes sense for the offensive system, and it's a mid-round draft pick. I don't think that Mason Rudolph wants to be in that situation where you have what they hope is the future, a guy that they're developing behind in case Kenny isn't the future and gets a shot, and he's stuck in the middle there. So I think Mason could go somewhere else as a backup, make himself somewhere between $7 to $10 million a year. Don't think that's with the Steelers. Who is my ideal pick at 20 as of right now? I really haven't dug too much into the draft stuff yet. Like I mentioned, I've watched 2 quarterbacks, watched a little bit of the corners. I want to get on the tackles pretty soon here. Mims is the guy that I really want to watch first because I think that he could be around in that range. Cooper DeJean out of Iowa would be awesome because of the versatility. Plays inside, outside, could also play safety for them a little bit too. Maybe Patrick Peterson's future would dictate if that makes sense for them. And then you also get a return guy out of it in the process. But he's a really good player. Either of the Bama corners, if either of them were available. I mean, Terry and Arnold's not going to be available, but like Kool-Aid McKinstry would be cool as well.
That's an all pro name right there.
Kool-Aid McKinstry, yeah, for sure. I actually thought he was going to be like kind of coming into this football season. He was the guy that everybody thought would be the top cornerback. Now I don't know. He may be an argument that he's like 3 or 4. Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, really good too. Probably more of a zone corner. So I don't know. I think corner would make a ton of sense to pair somebody on the other side with JPJ. So that's what I've been watching so far. But yeah, I got to get into the tackles because outside of Mims, I think Mims could make sense. But
dude, Cooper DeJean, I feel like it would be good because if you're living under a rock, you don't know. But then we'd finally have a white corner on the all-white team. That's something that's needed. We don't need to make a receiver play on the wrong side of the ball.
You got what, Riley Moss, who was a mid-round pick of the Broncos last year. I don't think he really played for them this year though, but also he's an Iowa guy. So
can we post Vietnam? Has there ever been a white corner in the first round? If we're just being honest.
What round was Seahorn taken in?
I don't know.
Seahorn.
I don't know. That's a good question. Seahorn. What the heck? Why did my computer just not? Jason Seahorn was drafted in the second round, pick 59.
Yeah, so I don't think
there's some smoke there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a good player. He's a good player.
He is a good player. I think he's a really good player. I think he would make a lot of sense. I think taking another corner, the two picks that they picked in their first 2 picks last year, I think you should make an argument that those should also be like considered for their first pick next year. Like corner and tackle, I think that you could see both going either way. Because when you look at a lot of the other positions and in terms of like positions of need and who they would take that early, like there's no linebacker that they would take that early. I don't envision them taking a defensive lineman that early. They're not going to take an edge that early. Offensive guys, as far as like running back, receiver, tight end, they're pretty much covered as far as guys they could bring into that position. So I think that you're really looking at corner and tackle again. The only kind of sexier pick that I would say would be more interesting that would definitely throw a wrinkle into next year is like if they actually thought about taking a quarterback again. Like if Michael Penix is sitting there at 20, do you like consider taking Michael Penix? If Bo Nix is sitting there at 20, do you consider taking him there? I'm not saying that you want him, but I'm just saying like the Steelers.
Yeah.
I feel like there's nothing off of the board when it comes to like them taking a quarterback as far as what round they take one in because of the play they got from Kenny Pickett. I feel like there should be no safety guards for this pick. If you want to take a quarterback and they believe in that guy, I feel like they should take a quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. A quarterback at pick 20. When's the last time they did that? Oh, 2 years ago with Kenny Pickett. Ross wants to know who we think for offensive coordinator. Or who do we want, I guess. I think this is who do we want. Let me see what the wording of this exactly was. If you had to pick the next OC, who are you picking? So yeah, it's a want. I've been a Shane Waldron. I've been a Shane Waldron guy for a while. He is not going to be retained in Seattle with them moving on from Pete Carroll, but that offense at the very worst was average. And you look at what those offenses were, what he's gotten out of Geno Smith. Definitely the case there to be made. I wanted him when we promoted Matt Canada. I wanted either Shane Waldron or Pep Hamilton. We got neither. So, but Shane Waldron would definitely be a guy that I look at. The other name that I thought of, and honestly, this one I just kind of recently dug into because I didn't know who he was, and I saw that he was getting some interviews elsewhere. Is who the Saints just hired? What's his name? The quarterback coach for the Bengals. Dang, he just interviewed with the Saints
Dan
today.
Pitcher?
Yes, Dan Pitcher. Kind of started to look into him a little bit. Obviously, like the play calling experience would be a question, but he would be interesting. I know the ones that people are going to throw out there, right? Like Eric Bieniemy, because obviously Washington's going a different direction. Is he part of their plans? I don't know that I'm necessarily super on board with that, but I could see it being that I could definitely see it happening. I could see Tomlin being a guy that would bring him in and give him an opportunity for sure. If nobody else were Alex Van Pelt, who was just let go in Cleveland. I wouldn't rule it out. Obviously has the ties. He's a Pittsburgh guy, played quarterback at Pitt. But yeah, if I had one top choice, it's Shane Waldron.
I'm happy my guy is not one that you named. Mine is Zach Robinson from the LA Rams. He's their quarterbacks coach /
another guy
coordinator.
that just interviewed with the Saints, I believe.
He did. I think that in what you want in a coordinator, he would provide a lot of the things that you were hoping that a guy like Matt Canada could have done, because I feel like a lot of people were expecting Matt Canada, because he was a quarterback's coach, to be able to develop Kenny Pickett more. And Zach Robinson played quarterback at Oklahoma State. He played in the NFL a little bit. He's been multiple positions on the Rams, but he's pretty much been on the Rams the whole time at various positions, whether it's wide receiver coach, quarterback coach, but he is the current quarterback coach and passing game coordinator. And obviously it's Sean McVay. So when you have a title of passing game coordinator, like how much do you actually contribute in that role? But I feel like it has to be a decent amount that's for them to give him that role. And I look at the type of offense, especially the passing attack that the Rams offense has. I mean, look at what rookie Puka Nacua did this year within that offense. I feel like he'd be able to bring the best out of the passing attack. And I feel like as someone who has played that position and has coached that position and has coached it at a good level, I mean, like I feel like Matt Stafford over the past couple of years, like no one's really complaining. And obviously Matt Stafford, you're talking about like a Hall of Fame quarterback. So how much does he actually need to be coached? But there's been no slump in Stafford's play really from going from Detroit to there. So I feel like that's something that I would look at, is someone who can also, obviously you want a quarterback's coach and you're not going to bring him in to be the quarterback's coach, but you need your offensive coordinator to connect with your starting quarterback. I look at what Kenny Pickett was able to do when he had that connection with Mark Whipple at Pitt. Those two were very close for several years, and that got them to that point for Kenny Pickett's senior year to have as well of a year that he did. If you want to get back to that version of Kenny Pickett, I feel like having an offensive coordinator that can bring that out of him is something that could be good.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thought for sure, too. It needs to be about the quarterback, in my opinion, whether it is Kenny Pickett or in the off chance they go a different direction, whoever the next offensive coordinator is definitely has to be about getting the most out of the quarterback. John
Enemy brings in Sam Howell. I said B enemy brings in Sam Howell.
No, I heard you.
Oh, okay.
John says, what assistants get replaced? Well, kind of touched on this. I think it's pretty much wholesale on the offensive side, other than Eddie Faulkner, I think stays. And Alfredo's kind of up in the air for me, but I'll say he stays. I'll be conservative with it. So to me, wide receivers, offensive line, and quarterbacks. So at least 3 of their position coaches on offense, I think, get replaced.
Yeah, I was going to say you can basically split the team in half, offense, defense, draw a line down the middle. If you're on this half of the line.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't even thinking about the defense is interesting. I mean, they're not doing the linebackers were so decimated. I don't know that they're going to hold that against the coaches like Aaron Curry or anything like that. Yeah, I don't know that there is one on defense that I would say. I will say, like, in my opinion, Terrell Austin should probably be on the hot seat. I don't think that they're going to hire a new coordinator on both sides. With all the injuries that did take place, I think that he's got a little bit longer of a leash there. So, yeah, I think defense is pretty safe. I'll say 3 of the 3 on the offense.
Yeah, I mean, my mind only goes to secondary when it comes to defense. But even when it goes to secondary, like, how much is it actually on the coaching staff for having a slow Patrick Peterson, like slow players in your secondary?
Yeah, Grady Brown's their secondaries coach, and he's pretty highly viewed. Like I think he's doing something at the Senior Bowl or something like that, or that might have been last year that he did. Every year runs together now, but he's pretty highly viewed, like outside of the Steelers organization as well. I don't think that they'll move on.
Yeah.
Kyle says, do we need to bring in Fields, Cousins, etc., or do the Steelers stick it out one more year with Rudolph / Pickett? Your opinions on immediate needs to improve the roster. So the way that this is worded is interesting, because if it's what I would do, I would definitely be looking to upgrade. What I think happens is they run it back. With Pickett, that is. Now, again, Rudolph could be the veteran in the room. I think it's more dependent on what the offensive coordinator is looking for than anything else as to if he will be. I don't think that you build the quarterback room and then say, hey, offensive coordinator, this is your quarterback room. I think you bring in the offensive coordinator and see what he wants from the quarterback room. So to me, I think they run it back with Pickett. I don't think that the 2 options that you threw out, specifically Fields or Cousins, are going to be super in play, and etc. Like, I think that they'll draft a quarterback. I just don't think it's going to be like any threat to Pickett's job immediately. Your opinions on immediate needs to improve the roster? Center, for sure. I think that they're going to draft a center within the first couple rounds.
Mason's Colt has played his last game in Pittsburgh, right? I mean, that guy stunk.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's got like the guard flexibility to, like, I could, and they appreciate him for the leadership aspect, always willing to talk to the media. I wouldn't surprise me if he's a backup next year, but I think that he's no longer going to be the starting center. Still need another tackle, still need a corner opposite Joey. The safety is interesting, but it's a really good free agent safety class. Like, that's the one area of free agency that I think is pretty strong. So I don't think you need to go to the draft route there. Because they're going to have other needs that they would like. I just mentioned, like, I think that you got to draft corner and center for sure. Tackle, like, you can't improve it all in the draft, obviously, but those are 3 areas that I look at immediately. Wide receiver, I think you need a 3rd wide receiver. Not only that, but Diontae's going into the last year of his contract, so that's like an immediate and future thing there. And then, off-ball linebacker could be an addition as well. It depends on, like, you don't know how they're going to recover from injuries, the guys that you lost. Cole Holcomb, Quan Alexander. And Quan's not even guaranteed to be back. He's a free agent, but if they want to bring him back. So, they cover it all. Defensive line, I guess, if Cam retires.
So like half the team.
Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of needs. Like, whether it's immediate, like as a starter, or a depth need, part of a rotation, like there's this roster is far from being complete.
That it is.
What sticks out to you? I mean, I mentioned pretty much every position, but like, how would you prioritize them at the top?
Honestly, I would look at, to me, my mind goes to secondary first. I think you have, obviously, Joey Porter Jr. is the future of your secondary, but I saw them get exposed a lot this year for inefficiencies, especially like speed. I think you need another boundary corner that you can rely on. And then I would also look at center clearly. I think the center play was very bad. We talked about it a lot this year. And those are mainly like starting positions. And obviously quarterback is one where that's like a no-brainer. Like obviously you're going to address quarterback, but to what capacity? I don't think they're going to take a chance on someone like Cousins or trade for Fields or whatever scenarios people want to throw out there. I don't think that's going to happen. I'd be intrigued by something like that happening, but I just don't think that's going to happen. That's not the way that the Steelers kind of go with those sort of things. Linebacker is one where I think that they could improve, but improve is not necessarily like finding a starter, but it also depends on, like you mentioned, like how are those guys going to come back from injury? Is Quan Alexander going to be re-signed? There's definitely positions, but I feel like honestly a lot of the things that I would look at is more depth issues for the Steelers that were exposed this year, not necessarily starters. But as far as starters go, I think they need to get at least another starter in the secondary. I think they need to get a starting center. And then the rest is really just depth from there.
And then I mean we've already touched on this, but at the risk of not leaving anybody out, Willie said honest prediction of what the Steelers can do at quarterback. Yeah, you know what's interesting about this that isn't worded the same way is what they can do, right? Like because they're going to be up against it cap wise. I know that they can create space. They can be like 40 million under with some restructures and obvious cuts and stuff like that. But even in that scenario, if you're talking about bringing in Cousins or something for 35 million, like that can't happen really without some other moves being made. I think they pretty much like Kenny Pickett to me is the 2024 day one starter until he's not.
Just trade for the number one. That'll solve all your problems.
Yeah. There you go.
Trade for the number one and draft your wide receiver contract.
3. Oh, okay. There we go. So it still is.
I said take the best player in the draft, not the best quarterback.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
If we're just being honest, you might. I don't know if you disagree with that. I think Marvin Harrison's better than is like the best prospect in the draft.
Yeah, he's definitely like the cleanest. Like there's nothing that he doesn't do very well. Like there's knocks on pretty much everybody else.
Yeah, you know what Caleb Williams doesn't do very well? Beat Utah. Freaking bum.
I'm interested to see how the discourse goes between him and Drake May as we get closer to the draft itself. But
I'm curious as a Steelers fan that doesn't have to worry about. Obviously, we have our own quarterback issues, but I'm curious to see what the Bears end up doing.
I mean, I know what I would do.
Keeping Fields or taking one of the two in the draft.
What would you? I know this isn't a Bears podcast, but before we get out of here, what would you do?
Man, I've thought about this. Like if the Steelers were in this scenario,
mm-hmm.
I'd probably move on from Williams or move on from Fields and take one of the quarterbacks.
Same. And I look at it, if the Steelers had gotten what they've gotten or what the Chicago has gotten from Justin Fields through 3 seasons, and we're in this position where they had the number 1 overall pick, and you have these quarterback prospects coming out and they didn't take them to keep Justin Fields, I'd be pissed. Not only because of what I think that you are getting in terms of the upgrade at the player, but you're resetting the rookie contract as well. Like once again, you're getting a guy that's in the very first year of a rookie deal where you have control of him for potentially up to 5 years at a very low number comparatively to other quarterbacks. So for me, I wouldn't say a no-brainer because I get the point of wanting to keep Fields and pairing like a Marvin Harrison Jr. Or if your idea would be to not take a quarterback, you should probably trade out of that pick.
Well, that's the thing. You probably also have to offset that by weighing your options as to we could take Williams or May, or I mean, let's be honest, they would take Williams. They would take Williams. They could take Williams, or what are you going to get if you trade that pick?
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, like,
you don't want to trade down too far.
Well, you don't want to trade down too far, and Chicago holds all the cards in this scenario because everybody knows who you're taking if they trade up for one. Like, every single person knows, whether it's Caleb Williams or Drake, they know you're taking a quarterback. So they can basically charge the max amount they can because they know what position you're taking.
Yeah. At the same time, it's like, I don't know if we're talking like 3 firsts is the most you can trade in a row, at least. Just because I don't think that they would want to move back far enough to get like that much more. Like, if they were willing to go outside of the top 5, yeah, the return could be absolutely stupid, like something unprecedented, like much more probably than they just got from Carolina. But because I think they want to stay within the top 5, it'd probably be like 2 firsts, 2 seconds, maybe something else.
Yeah. I don't know. It'd be nuts.
But anyway, not a Bears podcast. Just wanted to bring that up. Anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Not really.
Okay.
We have 33 weeks till our next episode after a Steelers game.
Very
not
true.
Not including preseason.
We'll still have Steelers content. They're an easy team to talk about, unlike the Pirates. Plus, I'm sure we're gonna have
what a ricochet shot for the Pirates.
Especially because it's like right after the season ends, like we're gonna have things to talk about that come out news-wise within the next week as the season wraps up. So check out the links that are in the description of the show wherever you're watching or listening. Everything Custom Designs, our friend Haley Wagner's small business. I've gotten some shirts from her. Tyler's mom has gotten some shirts from her. She has custom t-shirts, hoodies, a bunch of different clothing, just not hats. So hit her up and she can get you some custom shirts, t-shirts, hoodies, whatever it might be. Everything Custom Designs, Facebook and Etsy, link both those in the description. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments with anything that we talked about, any questions for the show going forward. Leave us a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast at. Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 4-2 Steelers show. Pop up right now. Another video is showing on your screen, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.